Michael Campbell, our guest. He's a financial and business analyst. You can see him on Global Television and on Shaw TV, of course. And you can also listen to him on the Chorus Radio Network on still on Saturday mornings.
Yep.
8:30 a.m. precisely on the whole network. So back to Greece, because you know that the Europeans don't want Greece to default, but didn't they kind of half bail them once, or what's the deal there?
Well, first of all, Greece is going to default.
Okay.
It's just, what does it look like? Does it mean that you had a bond, they owed you money, and it's supposed to come due next December, as an example? Well, do they say to you, well, we'll pay you, but we're going to pay you 10 years from now in December? Right. That's a form of default. Or
that's
they say,
what my kids do.
Yeah. And so you're absolutely right. Oh, don't upset me now.
Well, you know how the kids are.
But another form could be simply that they say, okay, the bonds were worth $100, now it's worth $70. That's another type of default. But Greece is going to default. Their credit rating is now so low. That's what the rating agencies are telling us. But who's the problem for it?
Right.
It's who's lent the money always. In this case, for example, the French banks just today, major banks have been put on credit watch because they're owed $56 billion. 56 billion right now.
Right.
It's the banking system they're worried about. This bailout doesn't help the Greek people.
Not at all.
No, the bailout is the financial system. Then it's a big debate whether are you really helping, are you not? Like when they bailed out the U.S. financial system or some of those companies. Did that help the American taxpayer? Because that's ostensibly what they said they did it for. I'm very suspicious. I'm not sort of knee-jerk on that.
Right.
No. I mean, these are serious decisions, and I believe they are seriously being considered. I just think they happen to be wrong. But that's who they're worried about, is the entire banking system. Does this start a real problem for the banking system? Well, then that snowballs.
Who can bail them? Who will bail them? Who should bail them? Or will nobody bail them and they'll just let Greece go sideways?
I think they'll find a way of delaying the problem, just like they're trying to do when they do the debt ceiling thing in the States.
Right.
It's just delaying the problem. At some point, I mean, this is what it's so ridiculous. I mean, it's so common sense, but at some point you have to be able to afford what you're doing.
Exactly.
So the aging population is the big variable. It supersedes, and people should listen very closely to this because you're inundated with political talk all the time. The aging population supersedes every single political ideology out there. And it won't matter, like if you're a socialist in Greece in government right now, you're forced into these austerity measures. It doesn't matter if you're a socialist in Portugal or a right-wing government here or a left. It's absolute. This is what kills me. This is irrelevant. The aging population is going to create such a huge demand on our healthcare and pension systems, which they already seeing signs. I'm not having to guess at this. I would have told you that 10 years ago, but now we're seeing it. That's why pensions are a big issue in the Air Canada potential labor dispute.
And in the post office
And the post office, exactly. But that's why. This is part of a bigger story. When I said earlier, the municipal pension problem in the United States is outrageous. It's just huge, and it's not going to be solvable. Because their revenues go down when property values fell with the real estate market. How are they going to pay these pensions?
I don't know, because medical science goes up, and we get
We're living way
new
too
hips
long.
and new knees, and some of us are going to live to be 100 or 104. And what are we going to live on? Those of us who don't have the big BOFO pension from the businesses or the government.
You know what kills me, though, about this is there's only one way out of this. And again, if I went and talked to the socialist prime minister in Greece, if I went and talked to Angela Merkel, center-right in Germany, everyone would tell me the same thing. We need economic growth. That's how revenues increase in government, not just tax issues. It's about
economic growth.
You can't tax enough to solve these huge demographic
Okay, so consumers have to spend, but my understanding is governments obviously depend on consumer spending, but we're pulling that back.
Yeah, there's been a real adjustment. I'd said right at the outset of the credit crisis, the thing I'd be watching is, did people change their buying habits? Forget that they're scared right now. But did they say, you know what, that third color TV may not be a necessity? Come on, I'm old enough, you're not, you're young.
Yes,
I'm old
way
enough
younger than you.
to remember when there were one-car families. And then it was a big deal when you went to a two-car family. Come on. Lots of people watching us today are in three-car families or more. I think people may start looking at that as conspicuous consumption. It's not for me to say, but I think they will pull back.
No, but less is more is a good thing.
Yeah.
The most indebted country in the world after Japan is the United States of America. That's astounding.
It is. Well, I want to throw it back to Canada very quickly. My question is, did our political leaders, our special interest groups, the people you hear all the time, have they learned anything in the last 3 years? The big four-letter word that we should be cowering about is debt. And look at the Canadian consumer. Record amounts of debt. We've had the Bank of Canada warn us, hey, be careful about that. So my advice to people is sit back and see if you can afford your credit cards or your mortgage or your car loan, that kind of stuff. if there was a 2 percentage point increase. So we went from 3%, for example, to 5%.
Right.
You know, in mortgages and variable rate mortgage. It's that kind of thing. Just check if you'll be okay, because it's not going to happen this year, I don't think, but it is coming.
Sure.
So you've got to make sure you're stable. And as I say, record amounts of debt in Canada.
Well, do you think a subprime meltdown will happen again? Haven't we learned that lesson, or didn't the United States
I don't think we've learned that lesson
We
at
haven't
all.
learned that lesson at all.
Yeah, I don't see how that's, I mean, I don't see any sign of this. All I'm looking for is evidence. I don't care, I personally don't care about my own opinion. I want the evidence to support that view. So in Canada, we have more non-mortgage debt than ever before. We have more mortgage debt and non-mortgage debt combined than ever before. We have governments with these outrageous amounts of deficits. And think about this, in the last federal election, reducing the deficit was not an issue. It is not a political winner. You know, I mean, people don't sit there and go, gee, I'm worried about our finance. No, they don't. We sit there collectively and say, I want more health care, I want more whatever. We have a list. It's all about who can promise.
Well, we can't make the connection. Some people can't. Lots of people can. They
love
say,
that
if
word,
we
by the
don't
way.
have any money, the social programs will be cut, the education will be cut, health will be cut. That's how it works.
Yeah, and I am really on about that these days, because we can't afford the ignorance any longer. There is a direct connection that we are not making between a strong economy. Those ideologies that are anti-business as a knee-jerk reaction to everything are obsolete. The trouble is, will they bring us down in the meantime? But all I ask, and I've been asking labor leaders, political leaders, interest groups, and I'm still waiting for my answer. You tell me how we are going to solve the funding problem for healthcare and the demographics, pension problems and demographics, let alone the deficit problem we already have, without a stronger economy.
And what happens with the Canadian dollar? As it's a little bit up over the US dollar, will that balance out? Will the US dollar plummet? What? Longer
term, keep in mind, we're talking the broad terms, currencies are all just relative. They're not an absolute measure of value. Why? And that's why we have gold going up. You know, we have stuff going up in value. They're a relative measure. So relative to the US, we're in way better shape. I expect a US movement here on a shorter term. But longer term, the Canadian dollar, Canada is in far better shape, whether you want to talk about energy ability, self-sufficiency, whether you want to talk about water supply, you know, our banking system. There's not a reason to think that the US should be stronger than us over any period of time. So I think Canadians have to be prepared for a much higher, Canadian companies, especially exporters, have to be prepared for a higher dollar going further. Now again, that trend can have interruptions. I still suspect Europe sort of implodes. Some of that European money goes into the US. That pushes the US dollar on a shorter term. But longer term, we're in much better shape than the US.
But there, 10 years ago or something, people had US accounts, US dollar accounts, because it just felt good to have US dollars somewhere.
And I'm proud to say that in January, in the RSP season of January of 2003, I said the biggest mistake you can make is not, I wrote it in the Vancouver Sun, broadcast it regularly, is to think that we need the diversification any longer. Canada is stronger than the States. That was at 63. I wrote a lead article that said the #1 story of the next 5 years would be the Canadian dollar at par.
So as you mix up your self-directed RRSP, you don't necessarily have to have US and Canadian funds. You can have it all in Canadian funds or European or
But it's interesting you ask that, because diversification is really hard now, because the markets all seem to move in tandem. You know, Europe goes down, we go down, everybody goes the same. So, so I say, well, I got money in Europe, I got money in Canada, I got money in... No, you're getting killed in the equity markets. So you have to be way more creative how to diversify. And if someone said to me, 10% of my assets are in US dollars, I have no problem with that, hedging my bets around. But the bulk of it's not going to be there anymore.
Okay, so HST quickly, harmonized sales tax. As you know, your brother is no longer the premier of the province, so you can talk about provincial politics finally.
Well, let me just interrupt right now, because this shouldn't be a political issue at this point. It should be an economic issue.
Absolutely.
We are about to make a serious economic decision here. There are lots of venues which you can express your political view. We call them elections for one, you know, but there's other venues too. They come on your show and they go on other talk shows and they write about it in the paper. This should not be at this stage a political issue. And if it is, I mean, I can go chapter and verse of, look how well that's worked for you in the healthcare. You know, it's really been a beauty. You know, no, it's an economic issue. And the one question I'd invite people to ask of themselves is, why does every accomplished economist in this country, every Chartered Accountants Association, say this is a good tax policy? No one likes any
and
taxes.
it's a progressive tax policy, and no matter what you feel about the mess,
and
forget that. If it drops to 10% by 2014, imagine what it would take. And I don't know how I'm going to vote yet, but I think I'm hedging towards HST yes. Or you vote no to make it happen.
Yeah,
to
but
keep
you've
it.
got to decide
Because
this.
what would it cost us to go back to GST, PST, hiring all the people back, doing the thing?
But
what's the future, long term?
Yeah, but why would we employ? Why does every economist tell you it's a good economic policy? Why would they say that? I mean, there's unanimity on this. There isn't sort of some debate about, I could give you lots of examples of debates in the economic side. No, this isn't one because it's a process. Right. It's not a prediction of, you know, what's going to come or, no, this is a straightforward process. And I've never come across somebody who had a tax expertise or an economic expertise, financial expertise, who thought the PST system was good. They knew it stunk.
Well then, see, I think,
so again,
they say long-term would put $120 in families' pockets, long-term, but people have trouble thinking long-term, 10 years down the road. I understand that because it's hitting the average family now.
Yeah, but I think there's been a tremendous amount of obfuscation of this issue. Again, someone who's watching today, who thinks about the world in political terms, won't like anybody saying anything about it. It's not about research, it's not about facts, it's not about saying what's best. We have a decision to make between the politics of anything and the actual issue we're talking about. And we have chosen incorrectly, I think provably, when the Supreme Court told us that we killed people on waiting lists, we might want to think our approach to healthcare wasn't really special.
Exactly.
That we fought every change. This is another case here, very quickly, that again, if you think it's a political issue, I say you're really misjudging the seriousness of the world's economic situation. There are going to be winners and losers going out economically in the world. There clearly are right this second. We have to prepare ourselves to be a winner. This is a good tax policy.
And I like that thought because we are winners and we're going to win tonight.
There you go, Fanny.
On that ice. You know, down the road, that sheet of ice.
Yeah, that stuff.
Okay, go Canucks.
Go Canucks, absolutely.
Nice
Thanks, Fanny.
Nice to see you. Michael Campbell, financial analyst.